The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed above me like agitated insects, making my already pounding headache worse. 3 hours. We'd been waiting for 3 hours, and my 7-year-old son Ethan sat beside me with an ice pack pressed against his swollen left eye, the skin around it darkening to a deep purple blue. His small frame seemed to shrink further into the hard plastic chair with each passing minute. "Mom, it hurts," he whispered, leaning his head against my arm. "I know, baby. The doctor will see us soon." I smoothed his dark hair away from his forehead, careful to avoid the tender area around his eye. My stomach twisted with a familiar mixture of guilt and anger. This was the 3rd time this month he'd come home from school injured. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. A television mounted in the corner played the local news on mute, flashing images of the city's skyline. I'd lived in this neighborhood my entire life. But after Mark left us 6 months ago, taking everything including our savings, the familiar streets had become a struggle rather than a comfort. I stretched my legs, the muscles aching from my double shift at the diner. My uniform still carried the lingering scent of fried food and industrial cleaner. A nurse called another name, not ours, and I sighed, checking my watch again. "Ethan, sweetie, I'm going to ask the nurse how much longer," I said, standing up. My son nodded, his good eye following me as I approached the reception desk. That's when the automatic doors slid open, and the atmosphere in the waiting room shifted. The man who walked in didn't belong in this rundown hospital on the wrong side of town. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, tailored perfectly to his tall, broad-shouldered frame. Dark hair, just beginning to silver at the temples, was styled impeccably, but it was his presence that commanded attention. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who expected the world to yield to his path. Behind him stood another man, whiter and with an expressionless face, scanning the room with practiced efficiency. A bodyguard, I realized, feeling suddenly uneasy. The suited man spoke quietly to the nurse at the desk, who immediately straightened her posture and nodded eagerly. I took an instinctive step back, planning to return to my seat unnoticed, when his gaze caught mine. His eyes were dark, nearly black, and for a moment, I felt pinned in place like a butterfly in a collection. Something flashed across his features. Surprise, perhaps, before his expression settled into polite detachment. He offered a slight nod before turning back to the nurse. I hurried back to Ethan, my heart beating a strange rhythm. "They said it shouldn't be much longer," I lied, sitting down. "Mom?" Ethan whispered, tugging at my sleeve. "That man keeps looking at us." I glanced up to find the stranger had taken a seat across from us, his bodyguard standing nearby. He was indeed watching us, though he quickly averted his gaze when our eyes met. Up close, I could detect the faint scent of expensive cologne, something woody and subtle that stood out amidst the hospital smells. "Don't stare, Ethan," I murmured, pulling my worn jacket tighter around me, suddenly self-conscious of my waitress uniform and the dark circles under my eyes. "Ethan Collins?" a nurse finally called, and I nearly sagged with relief. As we stood, Ethan stumbled slightly, dropping his ice pack. Before I could reach for it, the suited man had retrieved it, holding it out to my son with a smile that transformed his severe features into something unexpectedly warm. "Careful there, buddy," he said, his voice a deep, smooth rumble. Ethan stared up at him with his uninjured eye wide. Instead of thanking the man or taking the ice pack, my normally shy son blurted out, "Did someone hit you too?" I froze, mortification washing over me. "Ethan!" The man chuckled, seemingly unperturbed. "No, not recently. Did someone hit you?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "Tyler from school, because I don't have a dad to teach me how to fight back." Oh, my face burned with embarrassment and shame. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, taking the ice pack from the man's hand, careful not to touch his fingers. "Thank you." "Ethan, we need to go." The man's expression darkened slightly, but his voice remained gentle. "That's not right. No one should hit you, ever." Something in his tone made me shiver, a hint of steel beneath the velvet. "Sir," his bodyguard murmured, gesturing toward a hallway where another nurse waited. The man nodded, then turned back to us. "I hope you feel better soon, Ethan." We followed our nurse into an examination room, and I tried to push the strange encounter from my mind. The doctor eventually arrived, confirmed Ethan had no serious injury, and prescribed rest and ice. By the time we were ready to leave, nearly 2 hours had passed, and my shoulders ached with exhaustion. The waiting room was empty when we returned. No sign of the man in the expensive suit or his watchful shadow. Outside, the night had turned cold, and I pulled Ethan close as we walked to the bus stop 3 blocks away. "Mom," Ethan said as we waited in the pool of yellow streetlight. "I really like that man. You shouldn't talk to strangers, sweetie," I replied automatically, scanning the street for our bus. He looked strong, like he could scare Tyler. Ethan's voice was small but hopeful, breaking my heart all over again. The bus ride home was mercifully quick. Our apartment building loomed like a gray monolith against the night sky, its peeling paint and broken concrete steps a familiar disappointment. I kept Ethan close as we navigated the dimly lit hallway to our 3rd-floor unit, the carpet worn thin beneath our feet. Inside, I locked the door behind us, engaging both the deadbolt and the chain. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom that Ethan used, while I slept on the pull-out sofa in the living room. The kitchen was little more than a narrow galley with appliances older than my son, but it was clean, and it was ours, and the rent was just manageable on my waitress salary and occasional freelance graphic design work. "Bath, then bed," I told Ethan, helping him change without disturbing his bruised eye. Later, after tucking him in and kissing his forehead, I collapsed onto the sofa, too tired to pull it out into a bed. The glow from the street lamps filtered through the thin curtains, casting long shadows across the room. My phone blinked with a notification, a reminder about tomorrow's parent-teacher conference, the one I'd requested after Ethan came home with his 2nd injury. I stared at the ceiling, fighting back tears of frustration. Mark had left us for his 23-year-old assistant, abandoning not just me but his own son. The child support checks were irregular at best, and my attempts to build a stable life for Ethan felt like trying to construct a house with playing cards. One strong wind and everything would collapse. The memory of the man at the hospital drifted back into my thoughts. There had been something unsettling about him, something dangerous that lurked beneath his polished exterior. Men like him didn't belong in our world of discount groceries and past due notices. Sleep eventually claimed me, but my dreams were restless, filled with dark eyes watching me from shadows. Morning came too quickly. I woke with a crick in my neck and the sound of Ethan already up, the cartoon voices from the television providing a cheerful counterpoint to my groggy state. After a quick shower and 2 cups of instant coffee, I felt almost human. "How's the eye?" I asked, examining Ethan's face. The swelling had gone down somewhat, but the bruise had deepened to an angry purple-black. "Better," he said, though his wince when I gently touched the skin around it told me otherwise. "We're going to talk to your teacher today, okay? This can't keep happening." Ethan looked down at his cereal bowl. "Tyler says I'm a baby because I don't know how to fight." I knelt beside his chair, taking his small hands in mine. "Fighting isn't something to be proud of, sweetie. And you are not a baby. You're the bravest, smartest boy I know." His smile was hesitant but genuine, and I felt a fierce surge of love and protectiveness. I would figure this out, somehow. We left the apartment at 8, giving us enough time to walk to the school since I couldn't afford the bus fare for both of us this morning. The autumn air was crisp, the sky a clear, hard blue. Ethan chatted about his science project as we walked, his injured eye momentarily forgotten in his excitement about the solar system model we'd worked on the previous weekend. I was so absorbed in his description of Jupiter's moons that I almost didn't notice the black SUV that crawled to a stop beside us. The tinted window rolled down, revealing the same man from the hospital, his expression unreadable. My heart stuttered, and I instinctively pulled Ethan closer to me. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Good morning, Ms. Collins," he said, and the fact that he knew my name sent a chill down my spine. "I was hoping to speak with you and your son." "How do you know my name?" I demanded, taking a step back, ready to run if necessary. The man's lips curved into a slight smile. "The hospital forms last night, I happened to notice." He paused, seeming to register my fear. "I apologize for startling you. I merely wanted to offer my assistance." "We don't need help from strangers," I said firmly, though the threadbare sleeve of my coat and the bruise on my son's face argued otherwise. Mom! Ethan tugged at my hand, his eyes wide with excitement rather than fear. It's the man from the hospital. The stranger's smile widened, genuine warmth reaching his eyes. Hello again, Ethan. How's the eye today? It's okay, Ethan replied, stepping forward despite my restraining hand. Are you following us? The man laughed, a rich sound that seemed to vibrate in the air between us. No, not exactly. Let's just call it a fortunate coincidence. He reached into his suit jacket and I tensed, but he withdrew only a business card. My name is Gabriel Russo. I own several businesses in the city. He extended the card toward me, but I made no move to take it. What do you want, Mr. Russo? I asked, the name tickling something in the back of my mind. I'd heard it before, though I couldn't place where. Gabriel Russo placed the card on the edge of the SUV's window. I'd like to help. No strings attached. Please, be my dad, Ethan suddenly blurted out, causing both Gabriel and me to stare at him in shock. Ethan! I gasped, mortification washing over me for the second time in less than 24 hours. But Gabriel didn't laugh or dismiss my son. Instead, his expression softened, something like pain flickering in his eyes. That's quite an offer, he said gently, but I think your mom might have something to say about that. I was about to apologize for my son's outburst when I noticed the time on my watch. We're going to be late, I said, tugging Ethan away from the SUV. Thank you, but we have to go. At least take my card, Gabriel insisted, in case you change your mind about the help. Against my better judgment, I reached out and took the heavy cream-colored card, slipping it into my pocket without looking at it. Goodbye, Mr. Russo. As we hurried away, I could feel his eyes on us, watching until we turned the corner. Mom, why can't he be my dad? Ethan asked as the school came into view, its brick facade welcoming despite my apprehension about the upcoming meeting. Because we don't know him, sweetie, and people don't just become dads like that. I squeezed his hand. Besides, you have me. We're a team, remember? Ethan nodded, but the longing in his eyes remained. It was a look I'd seen too often since Mark left. The desperate need for a father figure, for the family that had been torn apart. As we entered the school building, I pushed Gabriel Russo from my thoughts. I had more immediate concerns. A son with a black eye, a bully who needed to be stopped, and the daily struggle to keep our fragile world from crumbling beneath our feet. Little did I know, the business card burning a hole in my pocket would change everything, for better or worse. The meeting with Ethan's teacher, Ms. Peterson, went about as well as I'd expected, which is to say, not well at all. We take bullying very seriously, Ms. Collins, she said, her voice carrying the rehearsed quality of someone who had delivered this speech too many times. But we need to consider that Ethan might be sensitive. I leaned forward in the uncomfortable plastic chair, fighting to keep my voice level. Sensitive? My son has a black eye. That goes beyond sensitivity, don't you think? Ms. Peterson adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, her gaze flicking to Ethan, who sat drawing quietly at a table in the corner of the classroom. Tyler comes from a difficult home situation. We're working with him on appropriate expressions of emotion. And meanwhile, my son becomes his punching bag? The frustration I'd been containing threatened to spill over. This is the third incident, Ms. Peterson. What exactly will it take for the school to intervene? She sighed, folding her hands on the desk between us. We've scheduled a meeting with Tyler's parents for tomorrow. I assure you, we're addressing the situation. In the meantime, perhaps Ethan could try spending time with other children during recess? He tends to isolate himself. Because he's afraid, I wanted to scream, because coming to school has become a daily exercise in fear. Instead, I nodded stiffly, recognizing the dismissal in her tone. The school bell rang, signaling the start of classes. Thank you for your time, I said, gathering my purse and standing. The words tasted bitter. Ethan looked up as I approached. Can I stay in today? He asked hopefully, his uninjured eye bright. I shook my head regretfully. I have to work, sweetheart. But I'll pick you up right after school, and we can have pizza for dinner, okay? His small smile was worth more than all the money in the world. I hugged him tightly, breathing in the clean scent of his hair, before reluctantly leaving him in Ms. Peterson's care. Outside, the autumn air felt sharper than it had earlier. Or perhaps it was just my mood that had soured. I checked my watch. just enough time to walk to the diner for my shift if I hurried. The card in my pocket seemed to weigh more with each step, and finally, at a stoplight, I pulled it out. The cream-colored cardstock was thick, expensive, with Gabriel Russo embossed in matte black letters. Below his name was a phone number and the words Russo Enterprises in elegant script. Nothing else. No title, no address, no indication of what enterprises he oversaw. I turned the card over, running my thumb across its smooth surface. The name still triggered something in my memory, but I couldn't quite place it. On impulse, I pulled out my phone and typed Gabriel Russo Boston into the search bar. The results loaded as I continued walking, and I nearly tripped over a crack in the sidewalk when I saw the headlines. Russo family donates $5 to Children's Hospital. Gabriel Russo acquires waterfront property for development. Authorities question links between Russo Enterprises and organized crime. That last headline made my blood run cold. I clicked on the article, scanning it quickly. It was from 3 years ago, speculating about connections between several legitimate businesses and suspected criminal activities. Nothing conclusive, just insinuations and unnamed sources, but enough to make my earlier unease solidify into genuine alarm. Gabriel Russo wasn't just wealthy. He was potentially dangerous, and for some reason, he had taken an interest in us. I shoved the card back into my pocket and quickened my pace, suddenly feeling exposed on the open street. By the time I reached Maggie's diner, my heart was racing, though not entirely from the brisk walk. The diner was already bustling with the late breakfast crowd when I pushed through the glass doors. The familiar cacophony of clattering dishes, sizzling griddles, and overlapping conversations washed over me as I made my way to the back room to change into my uniform. "You're cutting it close, Lily," Maggie herself called from behind the counter, her round face flushed from the heat of the kitchen. Despite her words, her tone was kind. She was one of the few blessings in my life. A boss who understood when Ethan was sick, or when the bus ran late, or when I needed an advance on my paycheck to cover rent. "Sorry, Maggie. Parent-teacher meeting," I explained, tying my apron around my waist and pulling my hair back into a ponytail. "How's our boy doing?" she asked, sliding a plate of pancakes across the counter to a waiting customer. I hesitated, not wanting to burden her with my problems. "He's hanging in there." Maggie's sharp eyes missed nothing. "That Shiner looked nasty yesterday. Same kid?" I nodded, grabbing my order pad and pen. "The school says they're handling it," she snorted, clearly as impressed with this assurance as I was. "Well, you tell Ethan he's always got a job here as a dishwasher when he turns 16. Build up some muscle, learn to stand his ground." The image of my gentle, science-loving son scrubbing greasy pots for protection made my heart ache, but I forced a smile. "I'll tell him." The morning rush kept me too busy for further conversation or worry. I moved between tables in a practiced rhythm, pouring coffee, taking orders, delivering plates steaming with eggs and bacon. The work was exhausting, but mindless enough that I could perform it on autopilot, leaving part of my mind free to worry about Ethan, about money, about the approaching winter with our apartment's unreliable heating system. And despite my best efforts, about Gabriel Russo. What could a man like that possibly want with us? The obvious predatory answer made my skin crawl, but something about our brief interactions didn't fit that narrative. He'd seemed genuinely concerned about Ethan, and there had been real pain in his eyes at my son's impulsive plea. I was clearing a table near the window when a sleek black car pulled up outside the diner. Not the SUV from this morning, but similar in its obvious luxury and tinted windows. I froze, dirty plates balanced in my hands, as the back door opened and Gabriel Russo stepped out. He was even more imposing in daylight, his tailored dark blue suit making every other man in the diner look shabby by comparison. His eyes scanned the interior until they found me, and he offered a slight nod before selecting a booth in my section. The same bodyguard from the hospital followed him in, taking a seat at a separate table with a clear view of both Gabriel and the door. My hands trembled slightly as I carried the dirty dishes to the kitchen. Through the service window, I could see Maggie staring openly at our new customer. "Sweet heaven," she whispered as I approached. "Is that Gabriel Russo in my diner?" "You know him?" I asked, surprised. Maggie looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Honey, Everyone in this city knows of Gabrielle Russo. Man owns half the waterfront and has the mayor on speed dial. She lowered her voice further. Some say he's connected, if you know what I mean. Old Italian family. The confirmation of what I'd read online made my stomach tighten. He's in my section, I said weakly. Maggie's eyebrows shot up. Well, don't keep him waiting. And for God's sake, give him the good coffee, not the swill we serve to the regulars. With reluctant steps, I approached his booth. Up close, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, suggesting he was in his early 40s. His dark hair was impeccably styled, and a platinum watch gleamed on his wrist as he studied the laminated menu. What can I get for you? I asked, proud that my voice remained steady. Gabriel looked up, a smile warming his features. Ms. Collins. Or may I call you Lily? The fact that he knew my first name without me offering it sent another chill through me. How did you find me? I demanded quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. This isn't a very big neighborhood, he replied easily, and I asked around. He set down the menu. I'll have black coffee and whatever breakfast special you recommend. I jotted down his order mechanically. Mr. Russo, I appreciate your concern, but following me to work crosses a line. His smile faded, replaced by a seriousness that made him look suddenly dangerous. I'm not following you, Lily. I'm trying to help you. Your son has a black eye and is being bullied because he doesn't have a father figure. I have resources that could make your lives easier. Why? I asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since the hospital. Why would you possibly care about us? For a moment, something like vulnerability flickered across his face. Let's just say I have a soft spot for single mothers and their sons. He tapped the table lightly with his fingertips. I'll have that coffee now, please. The dismissal was gentle but firm. I retreated to the counter, feeling his eyes on my back as I poured his coffee. When I returned to his table, he accepted the mug with a nod of thanks. The Florentine omelet is today's special, I said, professional mask back in place. Spinach, tomato, and feta cheese. Perfect, he replied, then added, When do you finish your shift today? The question caught me off guard. Why? Because I'd like to continue this conversation, preferably somewhere more private than a busy diner. And because you need to pick up Ethan from school, I assume. The reminder that he knew my son's schedule made my jaw clench. Mr. Russo, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm not interested in whatever you're offering. My son and I are doing fine on our own. Gabriel took a sip of his coffee, his expression thoughtful. Are you? The apartment with the leaky roof in the building with the broken security door? The double shifts that leave you exhausted? The school that won't protect your son? My face burned with a mixture of shame and anger. You've been investigating us. I've been learning about your situation, he corrected gently. Because I want to help. No strings attached. There are always strings, I said bitterly, thinking of every supposed kindness that had come with hidden costs throughout my life. Not with me. Gabriel reached inside his jacket and pulled out an envelope, placing it on the table between us. This is for Ethan, a college fund to start. It's already set up in his name. I stared at the envelope, not touching it. I can't accept that. You can and you should, for his sake. He pushed it toward me. I finish at 2:30, I heard myself say, the words escaping before I could stop them. But I need to pick up Ethan by 3. Gabriel nodded, satisfaction evident in his slight smile. I'll have a car waiting. We can pick up Ethan together. The thought of getting into a car with this man, this stranger who might be connected to organized crime, sent a wave of panic through me. No. I'll meet you somewhere after I get him. Gabriel studied me for a moment, then inclined his head in acceptance. The public library on Maple Street, 4 o'clock. Bring Ethan. They have an excellent children's section where he can read while we talk. A public place, with witnesses and security cameras. It was as safe as this meeting could be. I nodded stiffly, then turned to put in his breakfast order, leaving the envelope untouched on the table. Throughout the rest of my shift, Gabriel Russo remained in his booth, working on a sleek laptop and making occasional phone calls in a low voice. He ordered nothing else but coffee, which I refilled silently whenever his cup emptied. His bodyguard was equally quiet, nursing a single cup of coffee at his own table for the entire time. At exactly 2:30, Gabriel closed his laptop and stood, leaving $100 bill under his coffee cup. The envelope was gone, but as he passed me on his way out, he pressed something into my hand. A small, weighty object wrapped in a napkin. "For Ethan," he murmured. And then he was gone, the bell above the door jingling in his wake. When I unwrapped the napkin, I found a small, intricately detailed model of Jupiter, complete with its distinctive red spot and tiny moons. It was clearly expensive, made of some kind of polished stone or resin. How had he known about Ethan's solar system project? The gift was thoughtful, personal in a way that made it difficult to dismiss. I slipped it into my purse, alongside the $100 tip I'd tried and failed to refuse from Maggie. "He likes you," Maggie said as I changed out of my uniform in the back room. I shook my head. "He doesn't even know me. Men like Gabriel Russo don't sit in diners for hours drinking bad coffee for women they aren't interested in," she replied with a knowing look. "Be careful, Lily. He's not the kind of man you say no to easily." Her warning followed me as I hurried to Ethan's school, arriving just as the final bell rang. Children poured from the building in a noisy stream, and I scanned anxiously for my son's dark head among them. When I spotted him, my heart sank. His clothes were rumpled and dirty, and though his black eye was no worse, his expression was dejected in a way that hurt more than any physical injury. "What happened?" I asked as he reached me, kneeling to brush dirt from his jacket. "Nothing," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "Ethan, please, I need to know." He shrugged, the gesture so adult on his small frame. "Tyler said I made up having a dad, that I was lying about the man from the hospital." His voice dropped even lower. "He pushed me during gym class. The teacher didn't see." I closed my eyes briefly, struggling against the wave of helpless rage that threatened to overwhelm me. "We're going to fix this," I promised, pulling him into a hug. "How?" he asked, the single word containing all the doubt I felt myself. The model Jupiter weighed heavy in my purse, and the memory of Gabriel Russo's intense gaze weighed even heavier on my conscience. "I'm working on it," I said, taking his hand as we began walking toward our apartment. "Actually, sweetie, we're going to make a stop at the library first. I have a meeting." Ethan's face brightened slightly. He loved the library, with its endless shelves of books offering escape to worlds far beyond our limited circumstances. What I didn't tell him, what I could barely admit to myself, was that I was seriously considering accepting Gabriel Russo's help, whatever form it might take, whatever price it might ultimately demand. Because in that moment, watching my son try to be brave despite his fear, I realized there were few prices I wouldn't pay to keep him safe. The library loomed ahead, its grand stone steps leading up to promise or peril. I didn't know which, but I was about to find out. The Boston Public Library's main branch was a sanctuary of hushed voices and the comforting scent of old books. High ceilings arched overhead as Ethan and I entered through the heavy wooden doors, the noise of the city streets fading behind us. My son's hand tightened in mine, his eyes wide with excitement at the sight of the grand reading room stretched before us. "Can I go to the kids' section?" he whispered, already tugging in the direction of the colorful corner visible through a doorway to our right. I checked my watch. 3:54 p.m. "Yes, but stay where I can see you, okay? I have to talk to someone." Ethan's gaze swept the lobby. "Is it the man from the hospital? Is he here?" The eagerness in his voice made my chest tighten. "Yes, but is this for me?" He had spotted the bulge in my purse where the Jupiter model pressed against the fabric. With a sigh, I pulled out the small gleaming sphere. The craftsmanship was even more apparent in the library's soft lighting. Tiny, hand-painted storms swirled across its surface, and the miniature moons were perfectly detailed. Ethan gasped, carefully taking it from my palm. "It's perfect! How did you know I needed Jupiter?" "I didn't." Gabriel Russo's voice came from behind us, and I turned to find him standing a few feet away, watching Ethan's reaction with obvious pleasure. Today, he wore a light gray suit, less formal than his previous attire, but no less expensive looking. "Your mother mentioned you were working on a solar system project. Actually, I hadn't mentioned it at all, which raised troubling questions about how he knew." But Ethan's face lit up with such joy that I bit back my suspicion. "It's the best Jupiter ever," Ethan declared, holding it up to the light. "Look, Mom, you can even see the great red spot. It's beautiful." I agreed, meeting Gabriel's eyes over my son's head. Thank you. He inclined his head slightly, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I thought you might appreciate something educational. Can I go show the librarian? Ethan asked, bouncing on his toes. I nodded, and he dashed toward the children's section, the model planet clutched carefully in both hands. I watched until he had engaged one of the librarians in animated conversation, then turned back to Gabriel. How did you know about his project? I asked without preamble. Gabriel gestured toward a quiet seating area near a window, away from the main flow of library patrons. Shall we sit? I followed him to 2 armchairs positioned across from each other, a small table between them. From this vantage point, I could still see Ethan in the children's section, now showing his Jupiter to another boy about his age. You've been watching us, I said, keeping my voice low but firm, before the hospital. How long? Gabriel settled into his chair with the easy grace of someone accustomed to commanding any space he occupied. Not as long as you might think. It was genuinely coincidence that we met at the hospital. I raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident. The truth is, he continued, I've been funding an anti-bullying initiative at several schools in the district. Your son's elementary school is on the list for the next phase of the program. When I saw his injury and heard about the bullying, it resonated with me. It sounded plausible, but not quite sufficient. That doesn't explain how you knew about his science project. A shadow passed over Gabriel's features. I have people who gather information for me. It's a habit born of necessity in my line of work. And what exactly is your line of work, Mr. Russo? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Gabriel, please. He leaned forward slightly. I'm in real estate development primarily. I also have interest in shipping, hospitality, and private security. The phrasing was careful, diplomatic. It told me everything and nothing at once. And the rumors about connections to organized crime? If I expected him to be surprised by my directness, I was disappointed. Gabriel merely smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. The Italian surname makes it easy for people to jump to conclusions. My family has been in Boston for 3 generations. We've built a legitimate business empire. But? I prompted, sensing the unspoken qualification. But we protect our own, and we don't always wait for the law to catch up to those who harm the people we care about. His gaze flickered toward the children's section, where Ethan was now sitting cross-legged on a colorful rug, absorbed in a book while still clutching his Jupiter. Your son reminds me of someone. The admission hung in the air between us. I waited. Sensing there was more he wanted to say, Gabriel rubbed a hand over his jaw, the gesture surprisingly vulnerable for such a controlled man. I had a younger brother, Anthony. He was a lot like Ethan, gentle, smart, more interested in books than sports. When we were kids, he was bullied mercilessly. His expression hardened. Our father taught me it was my job to protect him, and I failed. The pain in his voice was raw, unexpected. What happened? I asked softly. Anthony took his own life when he was 15. Gabriel's eyes met mine, dark with old grief. I was away at college. I didn't know how bad things had gotten for him. By the time I came home for a visit, it was too late. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely moved by his loss. He nodded once, acknowledging my sympathy before straightening in his chair, composure returning like a mask sliding into place. When I saw your son in that hospital with his black eye, talking about being bullied because he doesn't have a father, I couldn't walk away. I glanced at Ethan, peacefully reading his book, unaware of the intense conversation taking place across the room. So, what exactly are you proposing? Protection, to start, Gabriel replied immediately. I can have someone discreetly watch over Ethan at school, make sure this Tyler kid and any other bullies keep their distance. The idea of my son being shadowed by one of Gabriel Russo's men was simultaneously comforting and terrifying. You mean like a bodyguard? The school would never allow that. They wouldn't know. I have people who are very good at being invisible when necessary. He paused. And I've made a substantial donation to the school's arts program this morning. The principal seemed quite amenable to my suggestion that we take a special interest in creating a safer environment for all students. My jaw dropped slightly. You bought influence at my son's school? In less than a day? Gabriel shrugged, as if such things were commonplace in his world. Perhaps they were. Money talks, Lily, especially in underfunded public schools. And what else? I asked, sensing this was just the beginning of his offer. Financial support. The envelope I gave you contains paperwork for a college fund for Ethan, as I mentioned. I've seeded it with $50,000. The sum made me dizzy. It was more money than I would earn in 2 years of double shifts at the diner. I also want to offer you a job, he continued. My hospitality group is opening a new restaurant downtown. We need a manager who understands both customer service and the day-to-day realities of food service. The salary is 3 times what you're making at the diner, plus benefits and regular hours that would allow you to be home when Ethan returns from school. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Why would you give such a position to a waitress you barely know? Maggie speaks very highly of you. She says you practically run that diner when she's not there. Gabriel smiled slightly at my surprised expression. Yes. I spoke with her before you arrived for your shift today. She also mentioned you have a degree in business administration that you've never been able to use. The fact that he knew about my abandoned education, completed with night classes over 6 years while working full-time and raising Ethan, was unsettling. I felt exposed, as if he had peeled back layers of my life without permission. And what do you want in return? I asked. The question that had been haunting me since our first encounter. Gabriel's expression grew serious. I want to be part of Ethan's life. A male figure he can look up to. Someone who can teach him the things a boy should know. The simplicity of the answer took me by surprise. I had expected something more sinister, more complicated. Why Ethan specifically? There must be hundreds of fatherless boys in this city. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window beside us, where autumn leaves danced on a gust of wind. Do you believe in fate, Lily? The question seemed out of character for such a controlled, pragmatic man. I'm not sure. When your son looked up at me with that bruised eye and asked me to be his father, it felt like Anthony was giving me a second chance. He turned back to me, his expression open in a way I hadn't seen before. I couldn't save my brother, but maybe I can help your son. His vulnerability was disarming, making it difficult to maintain my suspicion. Still, caution held me back. I appreciate what you're offering, but this is a lot to process. Ethan and I have been on our own for a while now. Having someone else suddenly involved in our lives, especially someone with your reputation, is complicated. Of course, Gabriel nodded, seemingly unsurprised by my hesitation. Take some time to think about it. The job offer stands regardless of your decision about my involvement with Ethan. I frowned, confused. You'd still give me the job even if I say no to everything else? I separate business from personal matters. You're qualified for the position, and I need someone reliable. That doesn't change based on your decision about Ethan. He reached into his jacket and produced a new envelope, this one containing what appeared to be employment documents. Look these over. The position starts in 2 weeks, which would give you time to give notice at the diner. I accepted the envelope cautiously, still not entirely convinced of his motives. And the protection for Ethan at school? Is that also separate? Something hardened in Gabriel's expression. That begins tomorrow, regardless of any other decisions you make. I won't allow a child to be harmed when I have the power to prevent it. His tone left no room for argument. And honestly, I didn't want to argue about that particular point. The thought of Ethan going to school without fear of being pushed or punched was too appealing to refuse. Thank you, I said simply. Gabriel inclined his head in acknowledgement, then glanced at his watch, another expensive piece that probably cost more than my annual rent. I have a meeting I should attend. Can I have my driver take you and Ethan home? The offer was tempting, especially given the autumn chill that had descended with the setting sun, but I wasn't ready for that level of acceptance. We'll be fine on the bus, thank you. He accepted my refusal with grace, rising from his chair. I'll have my assistant call you tomorrow about the job paperwork. And Lily? His voice softened slightly. I know this seems overwhelming, but I promise you, my intentions are good. With that, he strode toward the exit, his presence drawing subtle glances from other library patrons. Just before reaching the doors, he paused to look back at Ethan, still absorbed in his book in the children's section. Something like longing crossed his features before he disappeared into the gathering dusk outside. I sat for several minutes, trying to make sense of everything that had transpired. The 2 envelopes felt heavy in my hands. One containing a college fund that could change Ethan's future, the other offering a career that could transform our daily lives. Both gifts from a man who might be dangerous, who had investigated us without permission, who wanted to insert himself into our carefully constructed world of 2. "Mom?" Ethan appeared at my side, clutching a stack of books along with his Jupiter model. "Can we check these out?" I nodded automatically, rising to help him with his selection. As we approached the checkout desk, I noticed a man in a dark coat sitting near the entrance, his attention seemingly fixed on a newspaper. When we passed him on our way out, he folded the paper and followed at a discreet distance. One of Gabriel's men, already watching over us. The realization should have frightened me. But instead, I felt an unexpected sense of security as we boarded the bus for home. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I spread the contents of both envelopes on the kitchen table. The college fund documentation was legitimate, established through a reputable firm. The job offer was equally real. A management position at a new restaurant called Vesuvio, opening in the heart of the financial district. The salary made my breath catch, enough to move us to a safer neighborhood, to buy Ethan new clothes and books, to perhaps even save for a modest house someday. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "The position is yours if you want it. No strings attached. GR." As if he had sensed my continued skepticism even from a distance. I stared at the screen, torn between gratitude and wariness. There was something unnerving about his ability to anticipate my thoughts, to appear exactly when we needed help, to offer solutions to problems I hadn't even voiced aloud. Yet beneath the suspicion, another emotion was taking root. A fragile, tentative trust. Gabriel Russo was clearly a powerful man with questionable connections, but his pain over his brother's death had been genuine. His concern for Ethan seemed sincere, and regardless of his motives, the opportunities he offered could change our lives for the better. I texted back before I could overthink it. "I'll take the job. Thank you." His response came seconds later. "You won't regret it. Car will pick you up at 10 a.m. tomorrow to see the restaurant." I set the phone down, my decision made. Whatever Gabriel Russo's true intentions were, whatever complications his presence might bring to our lives, the potential benefits outweighed the risks. For Ethan's sake, I was willing to step into the unknown. The morning dawned bright and crisp, sunlight streaming through our thin curtains as I helped Ethan prepare for school. He seemed lighter somehow, his movements more confident as he packed his Jupiter model carefully into his backpack to show his science teacher. "Will I see Mr. Russo again?" he asked as I combed his hair. The bruise around his eye now faded to a yellowish green. "Maybe," I said carefully. "He's going to help us out for a while." Ethan's face brightened. Is he going to stop Tyler from being mean to me? The innocent question made my heart ache. "I think so, sweetheart. And your school is starting a new program to make sure all kids are treated kindly." "Because of Mr. Russo?" I nodded, unable to deny Gabriel's influence. "He cares about making sure you're safe." I knew he was nice, Ethan declared with the simple confidence of childhood, even though he looks scary sometimes. I had to smile at his perceptiveness. Sometimes people can be both, I suppose. We walked to school together, the morning routine unchanged except for the prickling sensation between my shoulder blades, the awareness of being watched, protected. At the school gates, I knelt to hug Ethan goodbye, holding him perhaps a moment longer than usual. "Have a good day, baby. I love you." "Love you too, Mom." He hesitated, then added in a whisper, "Don't worry. I'll be okay today." His confidence was new, stemming from the knowledge that someone powerful was looking out for him. As I watched him disappear into the building, I caught a glimpse of a man in a dark suit standing near the playground, his attention casually but unmistakably focused on my son. One of Gabriel's men, keeping his promise. The sight should have disturbed me, but instead, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I didn't have to worry about Ethan being hurt or afraid at school. I turned away, heading back toward our apartment to prepare for my meeting at the new restaurant. Whatever bargain I had struck with Gabriel Russo, this moment of relief made it worth the price. The black car arrived precisely at 10, its driver professional and courteous as he held the door for me. As I settled into the leather back seat, I caught sight of a small gift box on the seat beside me, tied with a simple blue ribbon. A note card rested on top, bearing a now familiar handwriting. For new beginnings. GR. Inside the box was a delicate silver pendant, a small, perfect star suspended on a fine chain. Nothing ostentatious or inappropriately intimate, just a tasteful gesture to mark my new position. As the car pulled away from the curb, I fastened the necklace around my throat, the cool weight of the star resting against my collarbone like a promise. Or perhaps a warning. Vesuvio wasn't just a restaurant, it was a statement. Located on the ground floor of a gleaming glass tower in the financial district, its exterior featured elegant stone archways and hand-forged iron details that somehow married modern sophistication with old-world Italian charm. As the driver pulled up to the entrance, I felt acutely aware of my simple sweater and slacks, clothing I'd considered professional until this moment. Ms. Collins. A young woman greeted me at the door, her sleek ponytail and impeccable suit making me feel even more underdressed. I'm Vanessa, Mr. Russo's executive assistant. Welcome to Vesuvio. Thank you, I managed, following her into the restaurant's interior. The space was stunning, soaring ceilings with exposed wooden beams, walls of honey-colored stone, and a massive stone fireplace dominating one end of the main dining room. Tables of rich, dark wood were arranged with mathematical precision, each set with gleaming silverware and crystal glasses that caught the light streaming through tall windows. We're set to open in 2 weeks, Vanessa explained, leading me through the dining area toward what appeared to be a bar area of equal elegance. Mr. Russo is particularly hands-on with this project. He's waiting for you in the private dining room. I touched the star pendant at my throat nervously. I'm not sure I'm qualified for this, I admitted, the grandeur of the establishment making my years at Maggie's Diner seem woefully inadequate preparation. Vanessa paused, turning to face me with an assessing look. Mr. Russo doesn't make mistakes in his hiring decisions, Ms. Collins. If he says you can manage Vesuvio, then you can. Her confidence was both reassuring and intimidating. We continued through a set of carved wooden doors into a smaller dining room, more intimate but no less luxurious than the main space. Gabriel Russo sat at a round table in the center, reviewing documents spread before him. He looked up as we entered, rising to his feet with that same fluid grace I'd noticed before. Lily, he said, his voice warm. Thank you for coming. His gaze moved to the pendant at my throat, and a small smile of satisfaction crossed his features. I see you received my welcome gift. It's beautiful, I said honestly. Thank you. But you didn't need to. I wanted to, he interrupted gently, gesturing to the chair across from his. Please sit. Vanessa, would you bring us coffee? As his assistant left, closing the doors behind her, I took the offered seat, conscious of Gabriel's scrutiny. Today he wore a charcoal suit with a deep burgundy tie, colors that should have been severe, but instead lent him an air of understated authority. Did you review the employment documents? He asked, gathering his papers into a neat stack and setting them aside. I nodded. The terms are extremely generous. They reflect the position's importance, he replied. Vesuvio is meant to be the flagship of our restaurant group. We intend to earn at least 1 Michelin star within the first year. The casual mention of such lofty ambitions made my stomach tighten with anxiety. Gabriel, I've never managed anything more upscale than a neighborhood diner. I don't know the first thing about Michelin stars or fine dining protocol but you know how to manage people, he cut in smoothly. You understand customer service, inventory management, scheduling, and crisis handling. The rest can be taught. He leaned forward slightly. I have a team of experts who will train you over the next 2 weeks. By opening night, you'll be fully prepared. His confidence in me was both flattering and bewildering. Why not hire someone with experience in this type of establishment? Gabriel's expression turned contemplative. Experience comes with habits and attitudes that are difficult to change. I prefer to find intelligent, adaptable people and shape them to my standards. His gaze was direct, unwavering. You're smart, hardworking, and you have something to prove, both to yourself and for your son. That makes you more valuable than someone with 20 years in fine dining who believes they already know everything. Put that way, it made a certain kind of sense, though I still suspected there were other motivations he wasn't sharing. Vanessa returned with a silver coffee service, pouring 2 cups before discreetly withdrawing again. The coffee was rich and fragrant, nothing like the burned brew I served at the diner. "How was Ethan this morning?" Gabriel asked, watching me over the rim of his cup. "Good," I said, surprised by the genuine interest in his tone. Confident, even. He took his Jupiter model to show his teacher. Gabriel nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "And did you notice anything different at the school?" "You mean, besides the man watching the playground?" I raised an eyebrow. "Subtlety isn't really your strong suit, is it?" A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Effectiveness matters more than subtlety in some situations, but I was referring to Tyler, actually." "I didn't see him," I admitted. Ethan went straight inside. "Tyler has been moved to another class," Gabriel said, setting down his cup. "His parents received a job offer in another district. Better pay, better hours. They'll be moving by the end of the month, but in the meantime, the school felt it best to separate the boys." The calculated manipulation behind this revelation should have alarmed me, but instead I felt a surge of relief so powerful it bordered on gratitude. "You arranged all that overnight? I told you, Lily. I protect what's mine." The words were spoken softly, but with an undercurrent of steel that sent a shiver through me. "Ethan isn't yours," I reminded him gently. Gabriel's expression softened. "No, but he asked for my help. That's enough." Before I could respond, the doors opened again, and a tall, imposing man in chef's whites entered. His stern expression and military straight posture immediately commanded attention. "Ah, Chef Marconi," Gabriel said, standing to greet the newcomer. "This is Lily Collins, our new manager." Chef Marconi assessed me with critical eyes, his handshake firm to the point of discomfort. "You have restaurant experience?" His Italian accent was thick, his tone skeptical. 6 years at Maggie's Diner," I replied, refusing to be intimidated, "and a business degree." He made a noise that might have been dismissal or acceptance. It was hard to tell. "We have much work, very little time. You must learn quickly." "I'm a fast learner," I assured him, straightening my spine. Gabriel observed our exchange with evident amusement. "Chef Marconi is the best in the city. Poached directly from Milano last year. He'll be handling the culinary side while you manage the front-of-house and business operations." What followed was a whirlwind tour of the restaurant, the state-of-the-art kitchen gleaming with copper and stainless steel, the temperature-controlled wine cellar stocked with bottles whose values made me lightheaded, the reservation system, the staff quarters, the security measures. Each area had an expert waiting to begin my education, and by noon, my head was swimming with information. Gabriel remained present throughout, observing more than participating, his attention divided between the restaurant preparations and me. Occasionally, I would catch him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, something between assessment and possessiveness. At one point, as I was reviewing the wine list with the sommelier, Gabriel's phone rang. He stepped away to take the call, his voice too low to overhear, but his posture stiffening noticeably. When he returned, his expression was carefully controlled, but tension radiated from him. "I apologize, but I need to attend to something," he told me, checking his watch. "Vanessa will continue your orientation. I'll have the driver take you to pick up Ethan when you're finished here." "Is everything okay?" I asked, concerned by the subtle change in his demeanor. Gabriel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just business. Nothing for you to worry about." He hesitated, then added, "Would you and Ethan join me for dinner tonight? At my home?" The invitation caught me off guard. We had moved from chance meetings to job offers to dinner invitations in the span of 2 days, a pace that left me struggling to find my footing. "I don't know if that's—" "Please," he said, the word sounding unfamiliar in his mouth, as if he rarely had cause to use it. "I'd like Ethan to see where I live, and we have some things to discuss regarding your new position." It was the mention of Ethan that gave me pause. Bringing my son to this man's home seemed like a significant step, an acknowledgement of Gabriel's growing role in our lives. Yet he had already done so much for us, and refusing felt both ungrateful and potentially unwise. All right, I agreed cautiously. What time? 7. Relief flickered across his features. The driver will collect you both. And Lily? He reached out, adjusting the star pendant where it had shifted slightly off-center at my throat. The brief touch was impersonal, yet somehow intimate. Thank you for trusting me. With that, he was gone, leaving me with Vanessa and the distinct impression that I was being drawn deeper into Gabriel Russo's world with each passing hour. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of training sessions and introductions to staff members who would be working under my supervision. By the time we finished, it was nearly 3 o'clock, and Vanessa escorted me to the waiting car. Mr. Russo has arranged for your things to be moved to a new apartment, she informed me casually as we reached the sidewalk. I stopped short. He what? Vanessa's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing surprise at my reaction. The company apartment near the restaurant. It's standard for management positions. Did he not mention it? No, he did not, I said, feeling a flare of indignation. I can't just move on someone else's schedule. Ethan has school. The apartment is in the same school district, she assured me. And it's fully furnished, with better security than your current building. Mr. Russo thought you would appreciate the convenience, especially with your new hours. The presumption was breathtaking, yet also oddly considerate. A safer home, closer to work, presumably nicer than our current apartment. These were things I would want for Ethan. That Gabriel had arranged them without consultation, however, felt like an overreach. Please tell Mr. Russo that I appreciate the offer, but I need to discuss any move with my son first, I said firmly. And in the future, I'd prefer to be consulted about decisions that affect our lives. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly, and I got the impression that few people pushed back against Gabriel Russo's arrangements. Of course, Ms. Collins. I'll relay your message. The car ride to Ethan's school gave me time to collect my thoughts. Gabriel was rapidly becoming a dominant force in our lives, rearranging pieces as if we were figures on a chessboard. His intentions seemed benevolent, but the speed and scope of his involvement left me breathless and wary. Yet I couldn't deny the tangible improvements already taking shape. A prestigious job with triple my previous salary, protection for Ethan at school, the bully who had tormented my son conveniently relocating. These were real benefits, not empty promises. When we pulled up to the school, Ethan was waiting at the pickup area, chatting animatedly with a teacher's aide. His face lit up at the sight of the sleek black car, and he bounded over as the driver opened my door. "Mom, we had the best day," he exclaimed, climbing in beside me with more energy than I'd seen from him in months. Mrs. Peterson let me show my Jupiter to the whole class, and nobody was mean, and I got to sit with Mason at lunch, and there's going to be a science fair next month. His excitement was contagious, his earlier fear and dejection nowhere to be seen. I hugged him close, breathing in the scent of school glue and the peanut butter sandwich he'd had for lunch. That's wonderful, sweetie. I'm so glad you had a good day. As the car pulled away from the curb, Ethan finally registered our surroundings. Whoa, whose car is this? It's fancy. It belongs to Mr. Russo, I explained carefully. Actually, he's invited us to his house for dinner tonight. Would you like to go? Ethan's eyes widened. Really? Yes. Do you think he has a pool or a game room? Tyler says rich people always have game rooms. I smiled at his enthusiasm, while mentally noting that he'd apparently still had some interaction with Tyler, despite the class change. I don't know, but we can find out. And speaking of changes, I took a deep breath. Mr. Russo offered me a new job, at a fancy restaurant downtown. Is it better than the diner? Ethan asked, perceptive as always. Yes, quite a bit better. Better hours, better pay. I'd be home in the evenings to help with homework and tuck you in. His small face turned serious. You wouldn't be tired all the time? The question pierced my heart. I hadn't realized how aware he was of my exhaustion, how much he'd noticed the dark circles under my eyes, and the way I sometimes fell asleep mid-story. No, I wouldn't be tired all the time, I promised. And there's something else. Mr. Russo has an apartment we could move to. It would be safer than our building, and closer to my new job. What do you think about that? Ethan considered this, his brow furrowed in concentration. Would I still go to the same school? Would I still see my friends? Yes, it's in the same school district, I assured him. He nodded slowly. I think that would be okay. Then, with the directness only children can manage, he asked, Is Mr. Russo going to be like a dad to me? The question caught me off guard. We've only just met him, Ethan. He's helping us out. But that doesn't make him family. But he could be, right? His eyes were hopeful, making my chest ache. He's nice, and he gave me Jupiter, and he made Tyler stop pushing me. I chose my words carefully. Mr. Russo seems to care about you, and he wants to help us. But becoming someone's dad is a big thing, sweetheart. It takes time and, well, it's complicated. Ethan absorbed this with a thoughtful expression. Tyler said his dad moved to California and got a new family. He said dads leave all the time. The casual cruelty of children never ceased to amaze me. Some dads do leave, I acknowledged, thinking of Mark with a familiar twist of bitterness. But that doesn't mean all dads do, and it's never the child's fault when a parent leaves. Never. Ethan leaned against me, suddenly quiet. I think Mr. Russo would be a good dad. He looks strong, and he has a nice car, and he doesn't yell like Tyler's dad. The simplicity of his criteria made me smile despite my concerns. Those are good things, but there's more to being a parent than that. Let's just get to know him better first, okay? No rushing into anything. He nodded, content with this answer for now, and turned his attention to watching the city pass by outside the window. I did the same, noticing we were heading into an area of Boston I rarely had occasion to visit, the exclusive Beacon Hill neighborhood, where historic brownstones commanded prices that made my new salary look like pocket change. The car slowed, then turned down a tree-lined street where autumn foliage created a canopy of red and gold overhead. We pulled up before a stately 4-story townhouse, its brick facade distinguished by black shutters and a glossy black door with a brass knocker. This is where Mr. Russo lives, Ethan whispered, eyes wide with wonder. I guess so, I replied, equally impressed despite myself. The driver opened our door, and we stepped out onto the sidewalk. Before we could approach the house, the front door opened, and Gabriel appeared, having changed from his business suit into dark slacks and a light blue button-down shirt, the casual attire making him seem somehow more approachable. Welcome, he said, his smile genuine as he took in Ethan's awestruck expression. I hope you're hungry. My housekeeper has prepared something special. As we climbed the steps to the entrance, I noticed the subtle presence of security, a camera above the door, the man sitting in a parked car across the street, the reinforced quality of the door itself. Gabriel Russo lived well, but he also lived cautiously. Ethan, oblivious to these details, was already peppering Gabriel with questions. Do you live here all by yourself? How many rooms do you have? Is there a game room? Gabriel laughed, a warm sound that transformed his usually serious features. Yes, just me and the staff. 22 rooms, and yes, there is a game room. Would you like to see it after dinner? Ethan's eager nod made both adults smile, and as Gabriel led us inside, I felt a strange sense of crossing a threshold that went beyond the physical. We were entering Gabriel Russo's private domain, a place few people likely saw. Whatever his intentions toward us, he was letting us in, not just to his home, but into his closely guarded life. The question was, once we were in, would we ever truly be able to leave? The interior of Gabriel's townhouse was everything the exterior promised. Elegant, tasteful, and undeniably expensive. The entryway opened into a grand foyer with a sweeping staircase and marble floors, but it was the warmth that surprised me most. Despite the obvious luxury, the home felt lived in, with soft lighting, comfortable furniture, and artwork that seemed chosen for appreciation rather than investment. Wow, Ethan breathed, his head tilted back to stare at a crystal chandelier hanging above us. Your house is like a castle. Gabriel chuckled, placing a gentle hand on my son's shoulder. It's been in my family for generations. Come, let me show you around before dinner. He led us through the main floor, pointing out the formal dining room, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a sunroom overlooking a small but immaculate garden. Ethan grew more animated with each new discovery. His earlier shyness completely evaporated as he peppered Gabriel with questions. "Is that a real sword?" he asked, pointing to a mounted rapier in the study. "It is," Gabriel confirmed. "It belonged to my great-grandfather. He brought it from Italy when he immigrated to America." "Cool." Ethan's eyes shone with admiration. "Did he fight bad guys with it?" A shadow passed over Gabriel's face. There and gone so quickly I almost missed it. "He protected his family," he said simply. Sometimes that meant fighting. The careful phrasing made me wonder about the history Gabriel wasn't sharing. The origins of the Russo family's wealth and influence. Before I could dwell on it, we were interrupted by a woman in her 60s, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Dinner is ready, Mr. Russo," she announced with a slight Italian accent. "Thank you, Sophia." Gabriel turned to us. "Sophia has been with my family since I was younger than you, Ethan. She's the best cook in Boston, though you can't tell Chef Marconi I said that." Ethan giggled at the conspiratorial tone, and I found myself smiling despite my lingering reservations. There was something disarmingly genuine about Gabriel's interaction with my son, a gentleness that belied his otherwise intimidating presence. The dining room had been set for 3, though not at the imposing formal table I'd seen earlier. Instead, we were led to a smaller, more intimate room, with a round table beside windows overlooking the garden. Candles flickered in silver holders, and the china and crystal were clearly the real thing. But the setting felt comfortable rather than stuffy. "I thought this might be less overwhelming," Gabriel explained as he pulled out my chair. The consideration surprised me. Another glimpse of thoughtfulness beneath the powerful exterior. Sophia served a meal that put my best cooking efforts to shame. Homemade pasta with a delicate sauce, tender roasted chicken, and vegetables so perfectly prepared that even Ethan ate them without complaint. Throughout dinner, Gabriel asked Ethan about school, his science project, and his interests, listening to my son's answers with genuine attention. "So you like space?" Gabriel asked, refilling my wineglass after I nodded my acceptance. Ethan launched into an enthusiastic explanation of his favorite planets, the possibility of alien life, and his desire to become an astronaut. I watched in amazement as Gabriel engaged with each topic, asking informed questions and offering insights that kept Ethan enthralled. "You know a lot about space," Ethan observed, impressed. "I read a lot," Gabriel replied with a modest smile. "When I was your age, I wanted to be an astronaut too." "Why didn't you become one?" Ethan asked. Something flickered in Gabriel's eyes, a brief glimpse of an old regret perhaps. "Family obligations. When my father died, I had to take over the family business." "Were you sad?" Ethan's directness made me wince, but Gabriel didn't seem to mind. "Yes," he answered honestly, "but we do what we must for family. Speaking of which," he turned to me, "have you had a chance to consider the apartment?" I set down my fork, choosing my words carefully. "It's very generous, but as I mentioned to Vanessa, I prefer to be consulted about decisions that affect Ethan and me." Instead of being offended, Gabriel nodded. "You're right. I overstepped. It's a habit in my line of work to arrange things efficiently." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "The apartment is yours if you want it, but there's no obligation. I merely thought it would be safer and more convenient." "What apartment?" Ethan asked, looking between us. "Mr. Russo has an apartment near my new job," I explained. "We talked about possibly moving there, remember?" Ethan nodded eagerly. "Can we see it, please?" Gabriel smiled at his enthusiasm. "Of course, tomorrow after school, if your mother agrees." I found myself nodding, unable to deny Ethan's excitement. That would be fine. Excellent. Gabriel's satisfaction was evident. And now I believe I promised someone a look at the game room after dinner. Ethan nearly bounced out of his chair, and Gabriel led him away with a hand on his shoulder, leaving me to follow. The interaction between them was becoming increasingly natural, as if they'd known each other far longer than 2 days. It was both heartwarming and unsettling, the ease with which Gabriel Russo was integrating himself into our lives. and how readily Ethan accepted him. The game room turned out to be a converted third-floor space that would have fulfilled any child's fantasy. Video games, a pool table, board games, and even a small basketball hoop. While Ethan explored with exclamations of delight, Gabriel moved to stand beside me in the doorway. "He's a remarkable boy," he said quietly, watching Ethan examine a model spacecraft displayed on a shelf. "You've done an amazing job raising him alone." "Thank you," I replied, surprised by the compliment. "It hasn't been easy, but he's worth every struggle." Gabriel nodded, his expression contemplative. "I've been thinking about what he said at the hospital, about wanting a father." He turned to face me directly. "I know we've just met, Lily, and I know my world is very different from yours. But I meant what I said about wanting to be part of Ethan's life." The intensity in his gaze made me take a small step back. "Gabriel, I appreciate everything you've done. But this is moving incredibly fast. We barely know you. Yet you trust me enough to bring your son to my home," he pointed out. "To consider taking the job, the apartment?" "That's different," I insisted, though the distinction felt increasingly blurry. "Those are practical matters." Gabriel's smile held no humor. "Nothing about my interest in you and Ethan is purely practical, Lily." He glanced at my son, now engrossed in a video game. When I saw him with that black eye, something in me shifted. I've spent years building my businesses, protecting my interests, but I've never had anyone to share it with, no family of my own. The vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. Why us, specifically? There must be dozens of women in Boston who'd be thrilled to date a successful man, who already move in your social circles. And how many of them would see me, rather than my money or influence? He countered. How many would have the courage to push back when I overstep, as you did about the apartment? How many would raise a son as kind and intelligent as Ethan, despite overwhelming odds? His words were flattering, but I wasn't ready to be swept away by them. Even if that's true, there's still the matter of your business interests, the rumors about your family's connections. Gabriel's expression hardened slightly. My businesses are legitimate, Lily. Yes, my family has a complicated history. Yes, I have methods and resources that sometimes operate in gray areas of the law, but I don't deal in drugs or trafficking or anything that harms the innocent. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. What I do have is power to protect what's mine, and I would very much like for you and Ethan to be mine to protect. The possessiveness in his tone sent a shiver through me. Not entirely unpleasant, but warning enough to make me cautious. We're not possessions, Gabriel. Of course not, he agreed immediately. Poor choice of words. What I mean is, I want to care for you both, to provide the security and opportunities you deserve. And what would you expect in return? I asked directly. His eyes darkened. Your loyalty, your trust, and eventually, perhaps, your heart. The bluntness of his answer left me momentarily speechless. Before I could formulate a response, Ethan's excited voice broke the tension. Mom! Mr. Russo! Look at this game. Can we play together? Gabriel's expression softened immediately as he turned toward my son. Absolutely. I warn you, though, I'm quite competitive. As they settled on the couch with controllers in hand, I took the opportunity to gather my thoughts. Gabriel Russo was offering us a life I could never provide on my own. Security, comfort, opportunities for Ethan. But he was also asking for a commitment I wasn't sure I was ready to make. His world was foreign to me, potentially dangerous, and he himself remained largely a mystery. Yet watching him with Ethan, the genuine patience he showed in teaching my son the game, the way he celebrated when Ethan scored a point, the respect with which he treated a 7-year-old's opinions, it was difficult to maintain my reservations. Whatever else Gabriel Russo might be, his affection for my son seemed authentic. The evening stretched on, comfortable in a way I hadn't expected. Eventually, Ethan's energy began to wane, his eyelids drooping despite his protests that he wasn't tired. I think it's time we headed home, I said, checking my watch with surprise. It was nearly 10, well past Ethan's usual bedtime. Of course. Gabriel set down his controller. I'll have the car brought around. No. Ethan protested, suddenly alert. I don't want to go yet. Ethan, I began, using my mom means business tone. "It's a school night, buddy," Gabriel said gently. "You need your rest. But how about this? If your mom agrees, you can come back this weekend. We could set up that science project you were telling me about." Ethan looked to me with pleading eyes. "Can we, Mom? Please?" The eagerness in his face made refusal difficult. "We'll see," I said, the parents' universal non-commitment. "For now, say thank you to Mr. Russo for dinner and the games." Ethan's thank you transformed into a spontaneous hug that clearly caught Gabriel by surprise. For a moment, he stood frozen, then carefully wrapped his arms around my son's small frame, an expression of such naked longing on his face that I had to look away. The drive home was quiet, Ethan half asleep against my side. When we reached our apartment building, Gabriel insisted on escorting us inside, despite my assurances that it wasn't necessary. "Humor me," he said simply, and I didn't have the energy to argue. He carried a sleeping Ethan up the 3 flights of stairs effortlessly, waiting patiently as I unlocked our door. Inside, he followed me to Ethan's bedroom, gently laying him on the bed. I removed my son's shoes and covered him with a blanket, deciding a proper changing into pajamas could wait until morning. When I turned, Gabriel was watching us from the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. I followed him back to the living room, suddenly aware of how small and shabby our apartment must seem compared to his townhouse. "Thank you for dinner," I said quietly, not wanting to wake Ethan. "He had a wonderful time." Gabriel nodded, making no move to leave. "Lily, I want you to know that my offer stands, all of it. The job, the apartment, my support for Ethan, even if you decide you don't want more between us." The sincerity in his voice was impossible to doubt. "I appreciate that. I just need time, Gabriel. This is all happening so quickly." "Of course." He stepped closer, close enough that I could detect the subtle scent of his cologne. "But I should warn you, I'm not a patient man by nature. When I see something I want, I pursue it wholeheartedly." His gaze dropped to my lips for a fleeting moment before returning to my eyes. "May I?" he asked, his voice low. The question was simple, but the implications vast. This moment, this decision, would change everything between us. It would acknowledge the tension that had been building since our first meeting, accept the possibility of something beyond professional boundaries. Part of me wanted to step back, to maintain the safe distance of employer and employee, but another part, the part that had been lonely for so long, that craved connection and security, leaned forward almost imperceptibly. It was all the permission Gabriel needed. His kiss was gentle but confident, a careful exploration rather than a claiming. His hand came up to cradle my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with unexpected tenderness. When we parted, his eyes remained closed for a heartbeat longer than necessary, as if savoring the moment. "I should go," he said, though he made no immediate move to leave. "Yes," I agreed, equally reluctant. At the door, he turned back. "I'll send the car for you tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. We still have much to cover at the restaurant before opening." I nodded, the reminder of my new reality, of how completely my life had transformed in just 2 days, bringing me back to earth. "Good night, Lily," he said, his voice a caress. "Good night, Gabriel." After he left, I stood for a long moment with my back against the door, fingers touching my lips where I could still feel the pressure of his kiss. I was stepping into dangerous waters, drawn by the promise of safety and comfort for my son, by the allure of a man whose power was tempered by unexpected gentleness, by the possibility of no longer facing every challenge alone. 6 months later, as I stood in the master bedroom of our new home, a brownstone not far from Gabriel's, purchased in both our names, I watched through the window as my son and his bonus dad, Ethan's term, not ours, worked on a treehouse in the backyard. Gabriel's men still maintained a discreet presence in our lives, ensuring our safety without intrusion. Vesuvio had opened to rave reviews, its success cementing my position and confidence. There were still moments when Gabriel's other world intruded, hushed phone calls, unexpected meetings, the occasional appearance of men whose purposes I chose not to question. But true to his word, he had kept that part of his life separate from ours, creating a bubble of normalcy within the extraordinary circumstances. "Mom, look," Ethan called, waving excitedly from the half-constructed treehouse platform. Gabriel steadied him with a protective hand, looking up to meet my gaze with a smile that still made my heart skip. Life with Gabriel Russo wasn't perfect or ordinary. It was complex, occasionally frightening, and had come to us through the strangest of circumstances, a boy with a black eye and a desperate plea to a stranger. But watching my son flourish under the protection and guidance of a man who had chosen us, who guarded our happiness with the same fierce dedication he applied to all his endeavors, I couldn't regret the path we'd taken. Some might call it a deal with the devil. I preferred to see it as finding family in the most unexpected place, and creating our own version of happily ever after, complications and all.